So my last video was about how I believe that Trump, through his cabinet picks and his nominations, is burning through political capital that he has. And one point of pushback that I had was that a lot of people said that Trump doesn't really need political capital. It doesn't really function into his logic. I mean, he's like the king of the Republican Party, and he doesn't need approval from anyone else, and everyone is in line. And I don't entirely accept that, because I think there are still some corners of the Republican Party that do not bend entirely to Trump's totalitarian rule of it. I think that the one bastion of opposition to Trump himself and his agenda within the Republican Party, and which was during his first term, and looks like it is going to be during his second term, is the United States Senate. I think there are a number of reasons why the US Senate, or specifically Republican senators within it, are more capable of standing up to and not agreeing with Trump publicly for two main reasons. And those reasons are terms in the Senate are long, and primaries and just general elections to the Senate are very expensive. On that first point, terms in the United States Senate are 6 years. It's the longest out of all three. The office of the presidency, House of Representatives, the Senate is the one that has the longest term to serve in office. And that means a lot, because if you're a senator and you make enemies or you piss somebody off, you have a lot of time to smooth things over with them. I mean, if you piss someone off and make an enemy of a political rival in your first year, that gives you 5 years to figure that out before you actually have to worry about facing your constituents again, as opposed to the House, where realistically, you have a year in the House of Representatives before you have to start running for re-election again, at which point any political rivals or enemies can really take the fight to you. And add on to that, we're currently looking at a recount, so I believe it's either 13 or 14. But the 13 or 14 Republican senators that were elected in this year, in 2024, all of them are going to outlast Trump. And of course, that's operating under the assumption that Trump will leave office. I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that he's not going to at the end of his term, but let's be honest, he will be 82 years old at the end of his term, and he's going to start running into the same limits of human anatomy that Joe Biden ran to when it was clear that he's just not physically capable of doing the job, if anything at all. So running under the assumption that Trump only has until 2028 or the start of 2029 to be president, this class of Republican senators that have just been elected have no real fear of retaliation from him. Because even if they make enemies of Trump and that passes on, that still gives them 2 years from 2028 to 2030 to smooth that over. So they don't really have a reason to be that afraid, in all honesty. And I think the same thing can be said of senators who were elected in 2022, because they have till the end of Trump's term, at which point he will bow out of politics. So that is 2/3 of Republican senators that have an ability to outlast Trump and his influence within the party. But let's assume the worst, and that Trump makes enemies of these senators who don't perfectly line up with his beliefs and support his agenda. It is really hard and really expensive to kick an incumbent senator out of their seat. The reason that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, don't like messy primaries is because they cost a lot of money. And every dollar that you spend internally, settling factional fights and running against each other, is a dollar that you don't spend actually going against the other party. Now, look, there are quite a few Republicans in the Senate that are up for re-election in 2026, and maybe Trump could spend a pile of money trying to get as many of those people who are his critics kicked out of office. But I don't think he wants to be making enemies in 2026 when he's probably going to be at his least popular. I say that because it's a norm in American politics that during your first midterms, you tend to get beaten senseless by the opposition. The opposition are the people that are looking at politics, they're upset with you, they're angry, and they're going to come out and vote. And I suspect that in 2026, Democrats will be very unhappy with the state of how things are going and are going to turn out at a higher rate than satisfied and happy Republicans will. In an environment like that, you don't want to be wasting your resources on a handful of primaries that are really going to go nowhere into an environment that is already anti-Trump, that is in 2026. And this is why I think that political capital is something you have to think about. If Trump wants to spend the next 2 years doing everything in his power to achieve his goals, but it comes with some sort of unpopularity, that is going to cause some degree of pushback from the senators who are going to be up for election in 2026, who do not want to be running in an anti-GOP environment. So it serves their interest not to do specifically what Trump tells them, but rather what they think will make the political environment most advantageous when they have to run again in 2026. I think this is really the crux of the argument. Most Republican senators are either going to be running once he's out of office or are going to be running once he's not really the leader of the party anymore. So they don't have to worry too much about his perspective or his approval. And the other ones are going to be running in an environment where he is something you want to distance yourself from. I mean, just look at this election, for example. The Democrats in the Senate that outperformed Harris did so by very vocally separating themselves from the unpopular Biden administration and running based on local issues that separated themselves from the Democratic Party at large. And that is what Republicans or Republican senators are going to want to do in 2026. And they'll need some record of not being a complete Trump loyalist the whole time. We're kind of already seeing evidence of this taking place. I mean, we've just had the GOP leadership elections for the Senate. Now that Mitch McConnell is gone, they have to elect a new leader of the party in the chamber. And it's going to be Senator John Thune of South Dakota, who is not a Trump pick. Trump's pick and Elon Musk's pick was Rick Scott, the senator from Florida. But instead, quite overwhelmingly, the Republican Party in the Senate voted for Senator Thune, who is by no means a Trump loyalist, actually quite a critic, never went along with the 2020 conspiracy in any capacity, and is pretty much Mitch McConnell's protege, which is not a compliment coming from the left side of politics, but it gives you a sense that this is not someone who is born and raised or even really loyal to in any capacity the Make America Great Again movement. Thune has already given pretty wishy-washy answers as to whether or not he's going to go along with Trump in his hope to get his whole cabinet appointed during the recess. And that's pretty important because if Thune doesn't go along with that, and so far he's given very maybe answers to that question, then Trump is going to have to put all of his cabinet appointments, all of the people that he's nominated through the Senate for a vote, basically what is essentially like a public trial and job application. And that's going to take a lot of time and it's going to be very, very messy. I just think that over the coming years, we're going to see the United States Senate be somewhat of a roadblock to Trump. The main reasons there being that either the senators there don't have a reason to fear him because they're going to outlast him, or those senators running in 2026, the only thing they'll be afraid of is being associated with Trump.